Welcome to Management 2020. This video focuses on the business writing chapter. Our main goals in this video is to talk about the concept of netiquette, introduce AI as a tool for business writing, talk about the important elements of email, and lastly, talk about why writing matters in business contexts. So let's talk about netiquette. Netiquette is kind of feels like an old-fashioned word here. It's been around probably for over maybe 30 years now, but really it's a portmanteau, or we might say a compound word, taking the word internet and taking the word etiquette and putting them together. So netiquette is this concept of communicating respectfully and cooperatively in online environments. And it's really important that we adopt or understand netiquette protocols because a lot of business communication is done in online environments. And so we need to make sure that we are representing ourselves and we're representing our organization effectively. I recently came across a social media post by a very prominent author and scientist, and someone had been mentioning, oh, he ought to run for public office. And he said, there are so many things I have written on the internet that are not professional that they would all come forward if I were to run for public office. So we should start now, if you haven't already, be thinking about how you present and communicate yourself online so that in job searches or when people are just looking for you, they're finding positive professional information on the internet and not something that would cause you problems in the future. So let's just do a quick overview of some of the netiquette do's and don'ts, right? Good online communication should be clear and concise, which is one of the fundamentals of business communication. We should be respectful of others, respectful of topics, okay? And we should think about before we share or post information. Is this helpful? Is this useful? Is this going to contribute to my goals? If it's not, just don't share it. Stay on topic, right? In business communication, we want to be direct. We want to use people's time wisely. So when you share information, make sure that it's targeted and useful. And if you're communicating in a forum, make sure you understand what are the patterns or expectations, or we could even use the word rules for that forum so that you are representing yourself and your community well. And lastly, acknowledge sources. This is perhaps one of the biggest problems with information on the internet is that sources are not acknowledged. People share concepts confidently, maybe even aggressively, without supporting that information. This is where our information literacy outcome comes in. We want to make sure that we are sharing where information clearly came from and that showing that we can trust that information. If we can't, don't use that information. Now, some things that we shouldn't do, don't spam, especially in business contexts, sales situations. Don't share repeated messages in forums that maybe that's not allowed or permitted. The idea of don't troll people, don't feed the trolls. Trolling, I think most of us are familiar with this, but trolling is the concept of sharing information on the internet that is designed only to provoke negative reactions out of people. Don't make those kinds of posts. Think it's got to be helpful, it's got to be useful. And if you see information that is designed to elicit negative emotional responses, don't respond to it. Just move on. Don't overshare. Respect, again, privacy, both yours and others. And don't assume tone. Sometimes in writing, it's really hard to tell if someone's using humor or sarcasm or other types of emotion. So don't try to guess what someone's emotion is. And usually, if you have to guess, assume the best out of people or just don't respond and move on. Don't plagiarize. Again, making sure you're citing your sources. Don't plagiarize other websites and take credit without explaining where that information has come from. And same thing goes with AI writing. And don't use offensive language. Try to, or as we mentioned in the previous video, try to be audience focused, relationship focused. How is this communication going to build relationships instead of undermine them? So let's talk about more in depth about AI. When AI, generative AI became more widely available a few years ago, there was a lot of calls from schools and universities to block it on their campuses, to ban it, not allow students to use it. I thought this is the absolute wrong approach. Yes, it felt scary, I think, for lots of educators that they were worried that they were going to lose control, that this would be a school tool for cheating. But the reality is, workers in the future, creators, innovators, leaders are going to use AI and they're going to be expected how to use AI effectively. So at universities and schools, we can't shy away from these tools. We need to learn how to use them effectively so we can help you as students use these tools effectively and ethically. And so throughout this course, there will be opportunities to use AI. If you have questions about AI use and whether it's permitted or not, please reach out to me. Some instructors are still very resistant to the idea of using AI for homework, so do not use it without permission. And we'll talk about ways to use it more ethically and responsibly. And we'll see how we can use it to do the work that we do more effectively, more efficiently. But it's not going to replace our thinking. It's not going to replace our writing skills. But what it can do is supplement and speed up the process of creating good quality, targeted, effective texts. So let's talk about some advice for using AI. One thing is, why am I using AI? How is it going to help me? And if it is, it's going to do the work for me so I don't have to think, then don't use it. You're not using it the right way. You need to maintain control over the ideas. You need to maintain control over your writing. But this can be a tool to quickly give you feedback or quickly find examples so that you can craft the text that you want to create. Um, Effective use of AI means involve revising and reiterating your writing. We talked about how business communication is iterative, right? It gets feedback, then it goes back and it adjusts the message until it crafts a really good message. AI can be part of this feedback loop you use to improve your writing. One of the concerns we've had with AI in the past, and although new models are getting better, AI does have problems with hallucinations. It wants to please the user. If it can't get the information the user wants, it will create that information, whether it's creating sources or artificially creating facts about a topic. It will do it. And so we always need to verify the information in a piece of writing that we have created with the use of AI is accurate. And that may often involve having to check information outside of the AI tool to verify that it's correct. We can never assume that anything that comes from AI is correct without already knowing that it's correct or then searching and verifying it. And we need to be concerned about ethical considerations. There are some organizations that don't want their employees to use AI. They're concerned about ownership. They're concerned about the information you put into AI and how that information might be used. So your organization might not want you to share organization-specific knowledge with an AI tool to craft a piece of writing. There's also environmental concerns about AI and the resources that it uses in order to provide us with feedback, that it's very energy intensive. So these are all things we should consider. As you move in out of university into business context, you should be asking questions about what are AI policies in this workplace? Where is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? And be asking questions about how others in the organization are using these types of tools to supplement their communication skills. So let's talk about a particular kind of workplace communication skill. Sometimes I work a lot with international students at the university, and it is sometimes challenging, both domestic and international students, to help students learn to use email effectively. And the first time I ever used email was as a new university student. People didn't have email at home. Only university people and others in specific industries that were connected to the early internet had access to email. And so I was never explicitly taught how to use it, but it's also the case that nowadays many people are using other kinds of channels to communicate on the internet beyond email. But email remains kind of a standard of communication tool in the business world. So we need to understand how to use it effectively, and it often involves using it very differently than we might use it for personal reasons. And I see lots of students submit emails that are not appropriate for the workplace. And so we should be practicing now in our university careers to develop professional email skills. when we're interacting with professors or staff members at the university. If you're just using email with friends and family, that's fine. You can use whatever kind of format works for you. But when you use it in a university or professional context, you need to be following the expectations for those contexts. So here are the parts of email. Hopefully these are familiar to all of you. But let's just talk about some advice for some of these sections that may not have been ever explicitly mentioned to you before. If you've ever sent an email, you know what the recipient box is. That's where you put the email address to the person you want to send the email. But let's talk about two other boxes that are part of the recipient area. One is carbon copy and blind carbon copy. Now, these names both come from a time before email when you wanted to send messages within an organization, often sometimes on a typewriter, and you could only create one message at a time on a typewriter. But then something was invented called carbon paper. And carbon paper kind of had ink on the back of it. So you could put a piece of carbon paper between two pieces of paper. And this way, when you create a message on the typewriter, the keys will hit the paper that you're writing on. It will hit the carbon paper and it will leave an imprint on the second piece of paper. So you create two copies of the message at once. And this was often done because maybe you're sending a message to someone, but someone else needs a copy of that message. It could be a supervisor, or it could be maybe the shipping department. Someone else needs to be made aware of that message. They don't need to take action on it. It's not a message directed them, but they need to have that information. And so that's how we would use carbon copy today, usually. So sometimes I might be emailing a faculty member in my role with the faculty development project, and I'm emailing them to tell them that they received funding or didn't receive funding, and I will often copy their department chair on that message. Or sometimes I have to copy someone from the provost's office on the message so they're aware of that conversation has happened in case there are questions about it later. Um, I'm directing my message to the person who's asked for the funding, but I copy other people who need to know that that message took place. Now, blind carbon copy is less frequently used. Some people have suggested, well, it might be used in HR situations where maybe you need to send a message, but you want to secretly not let the person know that who you're directly sending the message to, but you want someone else to be notified that that message was sent. So what that means is that anyone who was blind carbon copied can see who the message came from and who the message was intended for, but they're kind of like a secret person who can also see the message. I don't really use it this way. The most common way that BCC or blind carbon copy is used in professional contexts is when you need to email a large group of people, but you want to respect the privacy of that large group of people and not share their names or email addresses with each other. So recently I used this when I was communicating with new hires from the university, new faculty members, and preparing them for new faculty orientation. I needed to let them know the name, the date and time and location of new faculty orientation, but many of them had not received their SGU email addresses yet. And so they were using personal email addresses that were part of their job application materials. I didn't want to share their personal email addresses with each other, but I also didn't want to send 35 individual emails. So I emailed them all at once, but then I BCC'd all of their email addresses so that they couldn't see each other's email addresses. They didn't know who else was going to new faculty orientation. I kept their privacy until they became part of the university and they were officially hired. Then I used their SU email addresses. I didn't worry about blind carbon copying them. They already knew each other at this point. There was no concerns about privacy. So that is the most common situation when you might use a blind carbon copy is when you want to keep privacy for the recipients and you don't want them to see each other, but you want to send an email to a large group. As we go throughout the semester, we'll talk more about appropriate ways to use salutations, how to craft good messages in the email body, appropriate closings, and we'll also talk about the use of signatures, subject lines, and how to make sure that if you're going to include an attachment, how it is explained effectively in your message so that your recipient doesn't just delete your message. Lastly, let's talk about business writing, which was the subject of the chapter for today. Business writing can differ from other types of writing, most often because of the style and the register. Recently, I was grading some papers that students had written for an academic writing class. And one of the students had a well-designed paper, well supported by research, but the style or the register she wrote in was as if she were talking to her best friend. She used a lot of what we might say colloquial or informal phrases. It sounded very much like oral English, like a conversation I might overhear between two students talking to each other in a casual setting. It wasn't appropriate for an academic paper. It undermined her message because she didn't come across as professional. Now, the information was good, but the way she presented her information matters. And so this gets into this idea of it's not just the content of our message that matters, it's how we present the content of our message. Our presentation matters, our formatting, our vocabulary, our grammar. So the details matter. When we have typos in our message, when we have maybe informal grammatical structures that can be totally appropriate for spoken communication, but are not appropriate for written communication, we may be undermining our message, our image, maybe undermining our organization by the way we're presenting that content. So the goal of business writing is to help us understand how to communicate in appropriate business ways, how to adjust our writing, our grammar, our vocabulary, our word choices, so that we are writing in a way that is considered appropriate for professional contexts. Doesn't mean that the way you've been reading and writing and speaking are wrong, but it may mean that some of the ways you're using that language are undermining your message in a professional business context. And so throughout the course, we will be talking about ways that you can adjust and adapt your grammatical styles, your vocabulary, your organizational styles, so that you are presenting an appropriate style or register for business contexts. And so as we talk more about some of these things, it's not designed to punish you, it's designed to help you develop that business register. So in this video, we talked about Netiquette, we talked about AI as a business writing tool, we briefly introduced the concepts of email and how to use it in business context, and we talked about why your writing style matters in order to communicate not just your information, but to present a good image for yourself or your organization when writing. I hope this has been helpful, and if you have, again, any questions about the content of this video, please reach out to me.